что же, нас ждет последний доклад в этом зале на сегодня, и расскажет его нам Артур Чау, Chief Operating Officer of the Six Waves Company. So, please welcome.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for coming, and also want to express my appreciation to FlashGame for having me here. It's actually my first time in Moscow, so very excited about being here and sharing some of our experiences on the social gaming platform with the audience here. So I'm the CEO of Six Waves, also one of the co-founders, and basically just before I dive into the content of the presentation, just want to quickly give you some updates and background about Six Waves. So in one sentence, basically, we're the largest independent publisher of social games on Facebook. The company was founded in 2008, and we've been always focusing on Facebook, but last year we started to expand our presence into networks such as in Japan and also in China, and we also expanded into mobile platforms last year. So a quick company snapshot. Again, as I introduced earlier, we're #1 independent publisher on Facebook. On Facebook alone, every month there are about 20 million MAU, and on a daily basis, it's close to 3 million users playing the games that we publish or that we develop ourselves. Since we turned into publishing business in 2009, we have already published over 120 games. Right now, we have 5 global offices, including actually one person here in Moscow. His name is Alexei. He's our BD director. But we also have an office in Hong Kong, which is our headquarters, San Francisco office, a Tokyo office, and also our Beijing office. So you see we have offices all around the world to provide support for our developer partners and also to work very closely with all the different platforms. So right now we're operating on 6 different platforms. So other than Facebook, on Japan, we are operating on Mixi, Yahoo mobile game. In China, we operate on Tencent, which has Pengyou and also Qzone. And also on mobile space, we operate on iOS and also on Android. So we have actually partners all over the world. We're actually very glad to have a lot of partners here in Russia and also in Eastern Europe. We have partners, quite a bit of partners actually coming from the US. And recently, we also expanded our presence in UK in terms of partnerships. We work with BBC, who had one of the top TV show, Top Gear. They are actually going to do a Top Gear game, which we're going to publish on Facebook. So, we're actually going everywhere to reach out to partners and help independent developers to bring their games on the most popular social networks. So just a quick history, we actually, over the past few years, have published a lot of games, and quite a number of them actually had over 1 million MAU. So this is just a quick list. And more recently, Township and Astro Garden is, again, games that are coming from this region, which have been very successful after we put it on Facebook. And both of them are also kind of like broke the 1 million MAU mark. So how can we actually help a developer to push their games onto Facebook, and how can we drive users into their games? So basically on Facebook, we already have our own page, and this is a page where we tie all together the 20 million monthly active users on the network. So every now and then we actually introduce new games through our own page, but at the same time, on all the games that we publish, there is a cross-promotional bar on top of it. So as you can see, we will regularly feature different games on this promotional bar. What you may not see is that each of these bars is going to be different for each person. So depending on the age or the demographics of that person, he or she will see a different icon on that bar. So for example, if I am actually playing a female targeted game right now, the game promotional bar will show other female games that most likely are going to be popular for a female user, but will not show any hardcore battle type game, because we've seen that that will cause a lot of wastage. So we're going to be very targeted in terms of promoting games that the user will like. Other than the cross-promotional bar, we also sometimes use banner. So again, this depends on each of the user and also depending on which game we are pushing at that moment. So sometimes we also use a banner. Other than that, we also use tabs. So the tabs are actually very useful because it gives a different type of appearance where we can actually attract users to click on and react. So this is the very high-level overall user acquisition strategy that we work together with our partners. So initially, you see the yellow bar, which means cross-promotion. This is the time where we put a game on Facebook purely to drive users by using our cross-promotional network. So we will feature these games on the cross-promotional bar and also on our Facebook page. So as we drive more users into the game, we want to test that the game is very stable and that the game is going to be scalable. And we're going to actually clear out any bugs that we received in the initial stage. So after a while, once this stage is over, then this is where we start to put additional money into driving users into the game. So this is represented by the orange bar. So this is very typical. So as we continue to put money into the game, we actually will turn on more traffic within the own six-wave network and drive even more users into the game. Now what happened to the green bar? The green bar is the viral features. So these are the users are being attracted to the game through the viral features of the game itself. So for every partner that we have, we also assign a product manager to work with the partner, and we will give a lot of suggestions to the developer to implement changes that we feel is actually very useful to either drive more users into the game or actually improve the monetization of the game. So you see, by working closely together with the partner, the green part also grows, where naturally there are more users coming from the game itself because of the features that are being implemented. So this is very general a way of how we actually see user acquisition strategy. So just to show some real examples, again, these are the more recent games that we've been pushing on Facebook, Township, and also Astro Garden. So we basically follow the same route, and you see the numbers are actually growing for both of these games with MAU reaching 1.4 million for Township and close to 2 million for Astro Garden. So now turning to talk a little bit more about the global social opportunities. So the way we see it is that Facebook is definitely the most prominent platform with over close to 900 million users now. But Facebook is definitely not the only platform. There are also a lot of platforms out there. For example, in Asia, in Japan, we have Gree, or which I think some of you have actually heard the previous presentation. There's also Mixi and also Yaba Game. And then in China, you have Tencent, QQ, Kaixin, Renren. And then obviously, you have a couple of social networks in Russia here. And also Google Plus is also trying to gain more users. So I think overall, there are actually many different platforms for developers to try to put their games on and try to earn revenue from users all over the world. But however, I think Facebook is the platform that every developer should be thinking about, because with close to 900 million users and with users all over the world, I think it gives you the highest ROI, the return on investment, by putting your game on Facebook. You can basically reach pretty much everyone in the world, except for a few exceptions, which I will talk a little bit later. So this is information from Social Bakers that actually tracks the number of users on Facebook all over the world. And they also break it down into lists of continents. So what's interesting to see is that for Europe, North America, and Asia, all these three continents are over 200 million in terms of Facebook users. One big difference is that you see in Asia, the penetration is only 5.6%. Now the penetration means the penetration of overall population. So you see there's still a lot of room for growth in Asia for Facebook. Or the other way to look at it, there is a reason why in Asia, the penetration is relatively low. So let's break it down a little bit further. So I took the information and then I'll look at all the countries with penetration under 20%. And then I also then listed in terms of the number of Facebook users. So this is the result. So you look at India, Indonesia, these countries have huge population. So it's natural that the penetration is relatively low. For India, I think it continues to grow. And for most of the developers, or for us, India is relatively easy to tackle because it's mainly English-speaking country. So for those who can afford to go to internet, who can actually spend on the internet, they actually understand English quite well. So we'll just bring our English games into India without much localization required. Two particular countries that's worth noting is that number one, Japan. So Japan, the internet population is actually very big. But for Facebook, the penetration is very low at 6.9%. I think this has been actually discussed many, many times. I think there's a lot of cultural issues where the Japanese prefer using a different identity when they go online instead of using a true identity where Facebook requires. So I think for Facebook, Japan is still very challenging. And then for China, China is totally different story. China, as you might know, Facebook is being blocked from China, so you cannot actually access the Facebook website together with some of the sites like Google or even YouTube. Those are all blocked in China. So I think the challenge for Facebook in China is even more. So that's why as we help developers to bring their games on the global platform, we have a very different strategy for Japan and also for China, which I'm going to talk a little bit more now. So for Japan, so basically it is a game-friendly society. So a lot of kids actually grow up playing games. And the best thing about Japan is that people are very willing to pay for games or pay for internet usage. It also has a very reliable internet structure, not just for PC, but also for mobile. So basically it is also a mobile countries. I think very, very early on, through Docomo, a lot of users are already used to using their handphones to play games. I think one of the particular characteristics for Japan is that the Japan subway system, you are not allowed to talk on phone when you're on the subway. So what you see is that a lot of people, when they're riding on the subway, which usually takes over an hour when you go to work, they will just flip on their phone and they start to play games. So that's why the mobile market in Japan is so big. And when they design games for the mobile audience in Japan, they say that you have to keep it simple because most of the time you can only carry the phone with your one hand, and the other hand you have to hand over to the rail. So you have to make it simple, so it's just a couple of clicks to make it work. So that is something special about Japan. But it is a huge market. There are over 100 million users both on social networks or also mobile social networks. One thing about Japan is that the ARPU is very, very high. It's usually 5 to even 10 times of what we've seen on Facebook. Number one is because a lot of users are very willing to pay. And number two, I think it's also helped by the very strong yen currency for the last 2 years. And then retention is also very high. They tend to come back very often to play the game. But the challenge for developers is that the user's expectation is very, very high. They consume content very, very fast. So typically, when we see a Facebook game, it takes about a month for people to level up to 50 levels. We actually bring some games to Japan, and what we see is that within a week or so, they already finished the 50 levels, and they were complaining, can you add more levels? So for those developers who are thinking about the Japanese market, this is something that you have to put in mind. You have to develop a lot of features, and also you have to have a lot of assets in the bank so that you can actually continue to release those virtual items on a regular basis. So for China, China itself is a huge market. So right now, it's estimated there is over 800 million social network users in China. But however, very different from Japan is that the overall ARPU is still low in China. The ones that with high ARPU, usually they have a very strong PvP element. So we've been looking into games in China where they're very successful. You'll find that the people like to fight, and if there's a chance for them to fight, to win, to kind of boost their ego, they are very willing to pay. So again, if you're thinking about the Chinese users, one thing to think about is really to include a lot of PvP elements in your game. One other thing about the Chinese market is that it requires a lot of promotion and community building. So you have to do a lot of regular like promotions and also events to kind of like tie together the community so that they're actually being very involved in the game. And the way to do these is actually, there's a term called Weibo. Weibo is actually the Twitter equivalent in China. So they actually use a lot of these channels. So users are very accustomed to these channels, and if you want to reach out to users, not only that you have to kind of like keep your games updated, but you also have to reach out to them through Weibo or also other different forums where they actually visit very regularly. What we also see as a trend is that there are more web games being integrated into these Chinese social network platforms. So in the past, the web games are pretty independent, but I think some of them see the social networks phenomenon, and they also want to integrate the social graph into the web games to make it even more interesting as you are playing with your friends. So we see that trend is actually coming. And the other point is also you have to leverage on your existing networks, meaning so for the largest network in China right now is actually Tencent. So Tencent is actually basically started off with their own IM called QQ, and then they became much larger when they started their own games portal, and also providing email services and also search services. So they actually have this own little universe where a user can actually do everything under the Tencent brand. So they also do a lot of cross promotion between their own brands, so that you can actually leverage, for example, if you have a game on Tencent, you also want to use the Tencent Weibo to continue to promote your game and bring more users into your game. So originally my presentation was a little bit more about tips for developers, but I did realize they actually changed it to be more about the global opportunities. So, but I feel that I still want to share the tips for developers, because I understand there are actually a lot of developers here, and I think this is something that we actually do quite well. So given that everyone is here right now, I just want to go ahead and share a little bit more tips, in particular on the Facebook platform. So 5 tips. So tip number 1 is about user acquisition. So what we've actually seen is that Raven Sky City is a game that our US developer actually developed. So to grow your game, to get a lot of users into your game, I think a lot of developers know how to actually involve your friends to send a gift and all that. But this is something that we find is very, very effective, and it's called a select all friends. So when you involve your friends as a neighbor, or when you send a gift to your friends, what we try to do is that we put on the very first option with a select all friends box. We want to encourage them to select all friends so that the game can actually get a lot more viral by doing that. So from the developer perspective, you need to do a bit more coding, but we feel that that's really worthwhile based on the experience that we have. And actually after we've actually done that, we also share that coding with the developers that we've been working with. So we've seen it's very, very, very useful. So this is kind of like a graph that shows the invite request and also the DAU after we implement the select all friends option under that box. So we've seen actually it's very effective. So a very simple suggestion, but it works. Tip number 2 is about monetization. It's called instant completion. So the idea is that a lot of games require you to do a lot of tasks. So you have to collect certain special items, or you have to wait a particular time to come back so that you can complete your task. So this is again a very, very simple concept where if you want to do it immediately, want to get it completed and level up, you can pay for it. So this works very well in particular from the North American market. I think in general we feel that the Americans are less patient and they just want to get things done, so they're willing to pay for it. On the other hand, like for Asians, they're a lot more patient. They're willing to come back more often to the game to complete the task. So this is actually reflected the higher retention rate in Asian countries versus in the US countries. But On the other hand, I think the Asians may be a little bit more cheap. They're less willing to spend. So their ARPU in Asian countries are also less than the US countries. So this is something that we actually observe. So again, this is another game, Spartacus. They have a timer saying that how much more time that you require to get things done. But right underneath that, there is like a very highlighted button where saying, you want to finish this right now, just pay for 3 credits. Again, what we find is that you don't want to mark this too high because otherwise you discourage people to pay. But you want to price this at a relatively very affordable level so that people just, oh, you know what, may as well just buy it and get it done, and so that I can continue to play the next level. So this is the second tip. The third one is also about monetization. So for now and then, we do a lot of price promotions within the game. We see doing price promotion can give the game a big boost in terms of revenue. But the question is, how should we do it, right? Should we do it like as a 50% off? An item that's originally selling for $2, you now sell it for $1? Or do you want to do it like a buy one, get one free campaign, where you buy one, we'll give you an extra one? So we run a couple of tests, and what we find out more effective is that, okay, maybe I should ask a question. Who would think the 50% off is more effective? All right, couple of hands. Who thinks that buy one, get one free is more effective? All right, okay, so I think the majority is right. The buy one, get one free is actually a lot more effective in terms of generating revenue. I think people's perception is also that if you price it as a discount, they would view the value of the item is much less, so they may not be willing to pay in the future. But if you buy one and get one free, they don't see the value being diminished that much, so they're more willing to come back and pay for it in the future. So this is what we've done, and this is what we encourage our developers to do. And the other thing is that you also want to add a timer for this price promotion. You don't want to kind of like put it up so that it's available forever, right? You want to have this ticker where it's like, it's counting down, so people have the urgency to act on it and try to buy it before the time expires. Again, so this will be very effective. And what we see is that we always worry about what happened after the price promotion. Will the revenue drop off immediately? What we see is that if we do this buy one and get one free campaigns, the impact after the price promotion is not that much, right? You see, obviously it will drop back, right? But then it won't drop back to a level that is much lower than before. And what we also see is that even if you do it on a quite frequent basis, this still works. Obviously, you want to do the promotion on different items. You don't want to do the same item over again, right? So this time you want to do it on item A, and then maybe a week or 2 weeks later, you do it on item B. Or you kind of mix and match, right? So the get free item maybe is the same item, or it's kind of like a combo where you buy item A, I'll give you item B. So you have to mix and match a little bit. But what we find is that even if you do it on a more frequent basis, it won't really affect the revenue after the price promotion. All right, so tip number 4 is about monetization again. This topic is about payment page optimization. So I think the overall pay rate on Facebook right now, again, depends on different games or different regions, is anywhere between like 0.8% to up to maybe 2%, meaning that how many people that comes back to the game every day are willing to pay. It's still relatively low. So if a user has decided that they want to pay in a game and they're coming to your payment page, make it easy, right? Don't make them think too long about how to make a payment and what to buy. So this is an example, right? So this is a game that is actually before the change. So the good thing about this is that it's very clean. It's non-cluttered, right? So it's very clean. There's like, 7 rows, and it's very simple. But then the thing is that you don't really know as a user which option is better than the other, right? So you have to do a lot of calculations. So how many credits, how many money, and then what's the unit cost, and so it's hard for a user. So this is what we've done after the changes. So, well, a few things, right? First of all, we suggest that you should highlight what is the best deal, right? It may not even the best deal per unit cost, but you say it is the best deal for the user, so the user are more willing to kind of like go ahead and click on it. And then the other thing is you have to also make sure that the best deal is about the flow. So right now you see that blue horizontal line, that is the flow, meaning you don't want the best deal, you don't want the user to scroll down to the lower page to find your best deal. The best deal has to be above the fold. What's also very useful is that when you buy a particular package, you add in a mystery kind of element. So you give them something more, which they may not know what that is. So this will actually encourage the user to actually buy too. And also, for your lowest payment option, you want to set a higher threshold. You don't want to set the very, very low amount. So what happens is that we find if you set a relatively higher threshold, people will find the next higher threshold is still not that expensive. But if you set the lowest threshold, for example, at only like $1, which is very, very low, then the user may find the next option actually relatively expensive. So what we find that if your lowest option is $2 instead of $1, the overall output is actually better than the $1 option. So here's the last tip, which again is a relatively new thing that we've been trying. I think it involves a little bit more work from developers' point of view, but again we feel that it's actually quite interesting. So it's called try before you buy. So typically when you go to a shop, you list out all the items and buy this for X dollars, or buy this for how many kind of like in-game currency. What we tried on this Ravenwood game is that we also had a try button. So when the user click on the try button, that item will actually allow the user to put that item in the game, so that they could visualize how this item may work, and also how this item can make the overall game mechanics and actually better for him. So, and under this item, above this item, you also see there's a kind of like a timer on the trial. So when the user comes back, they know how much more time is left on this particular item. And there's also a button for them to say, you want to keep this, it's only for 19 credits. So we also mentioned it's actually also a special discount. So this actually encourages the user to buy, because it's like buying a pair of shoes, right? If you have a chance to try it on and feel it, it's a lot more convincing to actually eventually buy it. So even after the time has expired, when the user comes back and log in, it will actually flash up a dialogue and ask them to see the trial is actually over. But again, the special discount still applies, and if you want to just keep it, just click. And you don't even have to move that item again. It will just go back to the same place. So basically, these are just some of the tips that we want to share with everyone here today. I think as a summary, the topic about global opportunities, I think the global opportunity actually makes sense because it can maximize the revenue potential of the game. I think our experience in particular is that a lot of games from this region is actually very universal. We've done a lot of these games and we put on Facebook. They're very successful in the US market. We brought it into the Japanese networks in Yabage and Mixi. They're also very successful. So we do feel that games from Russia or in this region, actually the people are actually very used to the graphics style and the gameplay. So I think if anyone, I think people here actually have the best potential to maximize the global revenue on their games. Again, I think if you want to think global, I think Facebook is definitely the platform. It's the biggest platform. I think they've been actually reaching out to do a lot more to help the developers and to help games in general. So they just recently announced that they're going to have their own app center within Facebook. So we're now actually making changes and help the developers to help to bring their games onto the Facebook app center. So there's still a lot going on. It's not officially out yet. I think it will be later next week. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how that will actually change the gaming landscape within Facebook. But again, we do understand that gaming is actually a high priority for Facebook right now, especially as they go for IPO. I think they want to help the developers because the more successful the developers are on Facebook, the more successful Facebook is itself, right? So we're actually very confident that they will continue to ensure that Facebook is a good platform for game developers. I think the last one is that if you really want to think about the global opportunity, I would strongly suggest you have to work with local partners. Number one, I think a local partner will actually know what's the difference between different regions, the West and the East, what may work and what may not work. And I think the localization is not just about language translation. There's a lot more about localization in terms of the culture taste, user behavior, and a local partner can actually help you to do all that. You also want a local partner to have strong relationships with the local platform. Especially, it's maybe hard to maintain that relationship if you are not based in that country. But if you work with a local partner, they could actually give you the most up-to-date changes and policies and special promotions and marketing ways to push your games into different platforms. So lastly is also a local partner can actually help you to navigate the market in terms of how to make it most effective in terms of promoting your game to your audience and also provide customer service. So customer service is a big thing in Japan, for example. In Facebook, I think most of the users, they do not have high expectations when they send an email to customer service. Because after all, most of them, they're not paying for the games. It's not like the downloadable games. Most of the games are on a freemium basis, so it's free to play. So when they understand it's a freemium game, they may not expect very quick response from customer service. But in Japan, it's very different. Again, that's the way how they grow up. They've been, no matter where you're playing games or where you're actually getting a service from the bank, they require a lot of customer service and you have to give them very quick reply. So providing good customer service is also key as you expand into different countries. So lastly is that we have a lot of best practices. Today I just kind of like share a few for the developers here, but working with us together, we can actually give you kind of like ongoing updates on what are the best things to do for your games on different topics. But because of the timing issue, today I'm just going to share a few to everyone here. So that's basically conclude my presentation. So if you have any inquiries, general inquiries, you can send it to the BD email. But if you prefer to kind of like communicate in Russian, we also have our BD director Alexei here, who's actually based in Moscow, and that's his email address. So I think I actually have some time for questions.
Yes, thank you a lot for your presentation. It was really interesting and really useful information. And I think that you have questions. You can, like always, just put your hands up. Вопросы?
The question is, when we talk about local partners, the problem is with Facebook, with no local partners, it's worldwide. So, what about local partners when we're talking about Facebook?
For Facebook?
Yes.
Right, yeah. So I think for Facebook, it's hard because the Facebook platform is a global platform. When we talk about local partner for Facebook, how does that work, right? So I think it's more like global partners for Facebook. So, I mean, we are one of the examples. We have offices all over the world. And the reason why we set up a San Francisco office is also to maintain the Facebook relationship. So we go there and meet up with them maybe every 2 weeks to learn about what's new. And we also let them know what are the new games that we're coming up. So other than Sixway, there are also 1 or 2 other potential publisher that you can think about if you want to go to the Facebook platform. So my suggestion is that make sure that that partner understands not just the US market, the US market. I think most people, when they think about Facebook, they think about US, but it's more than US. Western Europe, we have a lot of traffic. In fact, about 30% of our traffic is coming from Western Europe and Northern European countries. And then 30% is actually coming from the US. And then roughly about 25% of our traffic is coming from Asia. So when you talk about Facebook, just to make sure that you want to capture the whole audience on Facebook is important, because that's the best advantage. It's the same API, it's the same platform. The amount of work that you need to change to capture additional audience of a different culture is relatively less compared to some of the other platforms.
One more question. So should you create a game for Facebook in different languages or just English?
Normally, our suggestion is that you start with English, because that's the best way to test your game. And that is still, after all, the biggest market. So even though we say US or North America, actually English include Canada and also UK and also Australia, that is still the biggest market, single market in terms of language. So I would suggest to use English first. And then as you also think about localization, when you localize your game into different languages, it's easiest to localize English to a different language. That's our experience, right? So we always start with the English language. So when we work with some of the Russian developers, their game may be in Russian, so we first localize that into English. And then from there, we localize that to Chinese, to Spanish, to French. Instead of doing Russian, Chinese, Russian, French, because it's so hard to find the language experts out there. So we always go with English to test the game, and the game works well, then we start to localize it into different languages.
Еще вопросы? Хорошо, если у вас появятся вопросы, вы можете задать их в перерыве после выступления. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a booth out there. If you have any questions, feel free to come. If you follow up questions while you're having a party tonight that you forgot to ask, I'll still be here tomorrow for KRI, so just feel free to drop by. Thank you very much.